Do you remember the first time, the first night that we had the activity? We came into these woods earlier in the evening, and we hit the blue drum that's at the entrance.
Yes, yes, that was the first night you were here for the Bigfoot Project, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So that first knock that happened, I don't know if you guys will hear that or not, but yeah, basically there was a knock right at the top of the hill over here. So I'm outside the cabin. Cabin's behind me here. I think you guys can see that. Yeah, that's the cabin. This is me. That means this hill right here, that's the hill where we've heard a lot of weird sounds and stuff. That really 100% just sounded like a knock. I'm hoping that is caught on camera. My response clapping was just clapping back at a noise right on top of that hill. If that was a knock and we captured it, that would be the first knock captured, but that's the second very clear knock I've heard in this area.
But lots of stuff happened that night. It wasn't just that.
Yeah, well, that's what kicked it off. But I always think about how this happened on multiple occasions. Do you remember that we would hear that drum get hit? Mm-hmm. But that was the first time it happened, was that night. We heard it hit twice, right?
Yeah.
And then everything moved into the lower woods down by the cabin.
Yeah, it seemed like curiosity.
Yeah.
Is what it seemed like, because we had the kids with us. So I think that had a huge part of it.
Yeah, I don't remember if we talked about that on the show at the time, but the kids were in the cabin when all that stuff happened.
Yeah.
And Corey thought that something had actually approached
the cabin.
Approached the cabin where the kids would have been.
Yeah.
Which is creepy.
Yeah, exactly, because he was there, and then you and I had walked out further onto the trail. Mm-hmm. And then we could hear them all around us, it sounded like.
I can't even see that, though. They're literally in front of me. Are you hearing this? That knock, that clear knock, that was right up here. And there's something on my camera that I can't tell. Turn that light off. I can't tell if it's eye shine. There's something up on this hill watching me. Okay. But we got sounds literally in every direction right now.
So, wait.
Okay, now they're throwing stuff.
Okay, so cool. You're not gonna leave me.
I wasn't running. They're all around us. I mean, they're here. It's more active than X in terms of percussion. It's not. I haven't heard the same vocalizations or anything yet. Yeah, I think at the time we talked about it, and I said that was way more intense than Area X, which at that point was the most upfront display I'd ever seen of these things actually being there, in the place. And when we were down there, it was like they did not care that we knew they were there.
Right.
Including there was a rock that was thrown at us.
Yes.
Yeah, there was just a lot of craziness that occurred.
And we say they because it felt like there was more than one.
It's definitely more than one. Because there were also percussives coming from the woods up here while that was going on. And then they were on both, you could hear them moving in on the trail on both sides. Yeah.
I just remember hearing them in front, us turning to look with night vision, and then we'd hear them behind us. Mm-hmm. It seemed like they were messing with us, is the impression that I got anyway. The
interesting thing about it is, so all this started with you moving. When did you move in here?
Like August or September. Yeah, it was August.
Was there like immediate activity when you moved in that you noticed?
It was shortly after we moved in, yeah.
Like
I mean,
what?
it was within probably 2 weeks of us moving here that I had come up here and heard the howl and stuff when my friend was here with me.
Because it's not classic habitat, because it's patchy forest and then like giant fields.
Yep.
And then you guys don't even have as much forest as like neighboring properties we've looked at. So it was weird that they were here at all.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is your mother-in-law had a sighting in December?
Yes, it was in December,
2017.
I believe. Yeah, just looking out her back window, she saw one in the field.
And that was right down the road.
Yeah, just a couple miles away.
Yeah, so they're here year round. But so the activity started in August. When the Catons had their experiences, everything was like July through September. That was like when the height of the activity on their property was taking place. Here, the interesting thing about here, I always thought, was we had all this activity start up in August, I guess, but then really ramp up when we started coming out here.
That would have been in September.
And then all the way into October, we were still getting wood knocks and stuff like that. November, it started dying way down.
Yep, around hunting season when that kicked off.
But the activity had died down by the winter, and then by the following spring, it was completely dead here.
Gone.
Yeah, everything was dead. But I always thought, well, maybe they're just not here. Maybe they move way out of this area, like during certain times of the year.
Yeah.
But we've also talked about this, and I think where we're at is they were pushed, I think anyway, they were pushed onto your property from the neighboring property where they started doing all the clear cutting for the ATV track or whatever they started doing over there. And then they're on your property for a while. We come in, start acting crazy. They're interested for like a week or two, well, a couple months.
Yeah.
And then it just died down completely. So where are they now?
Renowned author Charles Dickens once wrote that spring is the time of year when it is summer in the sun and winter in the shade. Residents of Ohio might think he was describing the general climate of their home state. Ohio's location in the mid-latitudes and its lack of mountains to the north or south expose it to a variety of air masses. In the winter, cold air from the Arctic pushes southward into the state, while in summer, humid air from the Gulf of Mexico rises north. In addition, Lake Erie has a significant impact, cooling shoreline communities in the summer and keeping them warmer in the winter. However, as long as the lake remains unfrozen, it also generates snowfall to the tune of 100 inches a year in areas where it's triggered by elevation changes. As a rule, Ohio experiences 4 classic seasons with hot summers, colorful, cool falls, cold winters, and balmy, bloom-filled springs, and an average of nearly 38 inches of precipitation annually, which falls on a relatively consistent basis. The changing seasons drive behavior of the living creatures dwelling in the Buckeye State. When conditions shift toward the extreme, native species have three essential options: hibernate, migrate, or stick it out. If that's true of white-tailed deer, turkey, bobcat, and bear, then what might that tell us about Bigfoot?
Have you noticed a pattern in activity with correlation to seasons or time frames?
Yeah, it seems to be in the spring and fall. I'm not sure why. I don't know if it's because of food sources or, I don't think they really hibernate or anything like that. Spring and fall is, the sightings go up for some reason, and then I'm assuming it has to do with food source more than anything.
The correlation with seasons, I think that Bigfoot typically is smart enough to get out of the woods during hunting season, and that's what I've kind of noticed. It seems like we get more reports in the spring and in the fall. So I'm not going to speculate as to what this creature's doing between those times, but I will speculate on the fact that when humans are in the forest with weapons, that Bigfoot's probably not going to be around.
It depends on what you're talking about. I do a lot of my research in Pennsylvania and in Ohio and out west. So out west, a lot of the things are happening in February, like early in the year. In Ohio and Pennsylvania, I would say you have, at least for the reports that I've taken myself, a lot of them are also in the spring and in the autumn. Why that is could be, the weather, the crops that are in or out. There's a lot of different theories about that, but I would say the majority of the reports that I've taken in Ohio have been in the spring and in the fall.
I think the biggest seasonal correlation to sighting reports is in the fall. And there are a couple potential reasons for that I think we can at least examine. The first is that with the fall comes the leaf cover is leaving, so that places that were concealed for travel are no longer available to creatures that prefer to be undetected. So I think that probably factors into it. The other part of the increase in fall sightings is the fact that many of the hunting seasons are beginning then, or in full swing, so that you have more potential witnesses out in the woods to in many cases be very still. They're trying to remain as undetected as Sasquatch are, presumably, and that seems to be a cross-reference to one another. And it's the old adage that in order to have a Bigfoot sighting, you need a Bigfoot and a person to see it. So hunting puts people out there in places where there's a greater probability of encountering one.
It's sort of like when sharks attack on beaches. It's not so much that there's shark-infested waters more than there's people-infested beaches. So the reports that we see are when we get more reports during the busy season because there are more people out. So there are more people on the trails, there are more people. So that carries on clear through hunting season in the fall and the winter.
It's important to remember, in order to have a Bigfoot sighting, you have to have a witness. And people are more active in warmer months, and people are more active during hunting seasons, and that's when you get most of your Bigfoot sightings. So I don't think that necessarily means that Bigfoot's more active, but I think that's just where you have more witnesses to have sightings or encounters. So that's where I think that you'll find most of that.
The major patterns that we've recognized is during rifle season. We have a complete drop-off of sightings, and that is obvious. There's firearms involved, loud combustion, these ordnance being sent downrange, and the explosions that occur when a rifle is fired is quite the deterrent for basically every animal in the woods. So it makes sense as to why we see a drop off there. The uptick is normally reported in around the nice weather times for the most part, simply because people are present. That's when we get the most reports, is when people are present in the forest. So it's going to be when weekends or holidays, things like that, when the general public are not confined to an office or a work environment. They're going to be out experiencing nature, and then they experience the unexpected.
Well, they're always more active probably from March or April of the year through the beginning of deer gun season, which is in November. And you need two things for a sighting to take place. You need a creature and you need an eyewitness. The more people there are in the woods, if there's a creature in the area, it's going to be sighted. Then you have to have that person willing to come forward and tell about what they encountered without being ridiculed. So I don't think there's much of a correlation as far as January 1st through December 31st. I just think it happens to be that the later in the year that you get, the more activity there is by the general public, and there's a better chance of sighting the creature if it's in the area.
When there are no people around to observe, you know, in the dead of winter, if you come out here in February, it's pretty slow. We don't get as many reports out of that specific time of the year, you know, but there's also no one out looking. We have research groups that are coming out, but this is a huge park.
And something that's very interesting too, that I think factors in especially to the Pacific Northwest cases, is that of salmon spawning. It just makes sense that you have this high density protein source being fairly easily available just by showing up at the river. And that seems to happen quite a bit in some of these Northern California locations. The problem with Ohio in particular is that there are no fish that spawn that way in our rivers. All of the game fish are stocked. So they're not naturally doing that. They may be a food source for Sasquatch for all we know, but I don't think that explains an uptick in sightings in Ohio as much as the leaf cover and the changing temperatures perhaps having an effect as well.
Some people think that they migrate, and I can't say whether they do or not, but I can say that we have found tracks all 4 seasons, you know, wintertime, summer, spring, fall.
Yeah, I think the seasons have a little to do with it, and me personally, my opinion, if Bigfoot exists, it's probably migratory. It will probably follow and exploit seasonal food sources. And that's just my opinion, and I think there's at least a biological precedence for that as far as other animals go. We can look at other animals and look at their movement during the seasons and kind of guess, well, if this animal exists, then it's probably exploiting, you know, seasonal foods. But here, I think you see more reports during the busy season because there are more people out, so they're seeing more things.
A lot of people think that the Sasquatches are nocturnal. I think they're intelligent enough to know that they are harder to be seen at night than in the daytime, but some people do have daytime sightings. So if you've got everything you need to keep them happy, you know, like food and cover, I think you're going to have them there.
Regardless of time of year.
Yeah.
I mean, again, the reports are coming in when people are out more, but you know, I've taken reports of things that have happened in the wintertime too. I think it's just a matter of a fewer amount of people that are making those reports. Now, I think in the wintertime, it's easier to see them, it's easier to track them in the snow especially, and with the leaf litter off and things like that, but you know, there's only a few crazies like us that go out in the middle of the winter, camping and running around in the woods. when it's like 20 degrees out.
The sightings are more in the spring and the summer and the fall, I believe. People are more active, they're outside more. You know, they're in tents, they're camping, they're out in nature. They're going kayaking down the rivers. They're getting out where normal people aren't at in the middle of winter.
I think summer more or less, but I think maybe there's more reports because people are out in the summer more. But I've also had experiences myself in the winter and summer. So I just think they're out there. People aren't seeing them as much in the other seasons, and especially when the foliage gets in full bloom.
Oh, definitely. Since I started this, like it seems like the air, well, first of all, obviously nobody knows when they're gonna be in the areas, and I can't explain why they disappear from areas, but they do. But it seems like my activity, I get a lot of it like this time of year, early spring. You know, the end of April through May, it seems to be when things start picking up. And then once you get a lot of the really dense foliage, it gets harder to go places. But I would say pretty much May and June seem to be my most active. You know, and I don't know exactly why, but I'm assuming we personally think it has something to do with, breeding, that kind of thing. So
there's sightings all year long, but it comes down to two things. We're humans, we don't go out in the winter, we don't see much. So you don't get nearly as many sightings in the winter because obviously we're not outside. In the springtime, I found here, at least in Ohio, that activity picks up. They're hungry, they're looking for food. Several times we've used dumpsters as bait, using that as bait, and at that point in time of the year. In the summer, it seems to calm down a little bit. Food sources are plentiful. They don't have to venture farther than they normally would, and it's easy for them. And then in the fall, you start to see it pick up again with the harvest, and obviously, just like black bears trying to gorge themselves to get them through the winter.
With 1/3 of its land forested, tens of thousands of miles of rivers and streams, and tolerable weather for the majority of the year, Ohio would seem to present an ideal habitat in which Bigfoot might survive, if not thrive. It is a matter of record that Sasquatch activity and sign has been observed here in all 4 seasons, including winter. In one case, from the files of Doug Waller, a Muskingum County couple discovered huge footprints in the snow in their yard. It was February of 2015 when they found 21-inch tracks leading back to the woods near their house. When considering that the track line was found near the family's trash bins and that they routinely disposed of food scraps outside, it's possible this wintertime visit was driven by the most fundamental of needs, that of hunger and calorie requirements. Or consider this instance from December 2023, a day before Christmas Eve. 2 women, a former teacher and her daughter-in-law, were driving on a country road in Montgomery County. It was a foggy night and a light snow had just fallen. As they reached the top of a hill, they both watched in astonishment as a 7-foot-tall figure with jet black hair and long swinging arms took 2 steps to cross the road in front of their SUV and kept going, leaving behind tracks that were 18 inches long and 5 inches across at the toes. Based on such reports, one might conclude that a run-in with Bigfoot in Ohio is possible at any date on the calendar. But is there a time of year during which sightings seem to cluster? The anecdotal evidence more than suggests that there is. And this pattern has as much to do with cycles of human activity as any other contributing factor.
My name is Colleen Norris, and I've been a researcher for over 30-some years. We've had a lot of experiences in this area. This is the Coshocton County. Salt Fork isn't very far from here. When I grew up, I was in southern part of Summit County at the southern end of the Portage Lakes near the little town of Clinton. We had them, and they were they kept to themselves, but they always stayed around the rivers. That's where you find their huts. A few years ago, there was a well-known photograph of a stick igloo found by, let's see, I believe Jody Cook and another researcher, found in Akron near the Portage Lakes, and that is the area where I saw mine. Can't say that they made the igloo, but the igloos were quite large. My first encounter with one was probably 30-some years ago, heading north on State Route 93, just past Nesmith Lake, the Tuscaroras River, and before I went into the town of Kenmore. Now, Kenmore has their own sighting reports too, and they call it the Kenmore Grassman. I guess it's been going on for quite some time, but they don't know what it is. Well, I witnessed mine sitting underneath a bridge right next to the Tuscaroras River. And it was very early in the morning. It was like the crack of dawn. I'm driving north on 93. I look over, and there's a figure crouched underneath the bridge. And it slid down on its butt, got to his feet, and went behind one of those pillars that hold the bridge up, the concrete pillars. But I got to see it. I saw everything. I could tell that it was absolutely naked, but it was covered in hair. It didn't have fur, it had hair. It had hair that you could see through. You could see the body through. We made eye contact for about, I'd say 30 seconds. There was no traffic behind me, no traffic coming. And that's where I discovered this term, the chicklet's teeth. And because its teeth were large and flat, he grinned. He showed no anger. He didn't try to intimidate me. He looked at me and he grinned. But then he started playing peekaboo. He would go to the left of the pillar, and then he would look at me, and he would come back to the right side of the pillar, and he would look at me. Well, this went on for like 30-some seconds as I'm sitting in the northbound lane. Finally, I think he had enough. He turned around and ran up behind the embankment near Nesmith Lake. So I didn't know what it was. This is 30-some years ago. I was on leave from the United States Army. I went a few years up there and didn't really see anything, but I heard reports and things like that. Talked with a lot of people. We had some encounters in the Clinton area by other folks, neighbors saying they saw them. Just strange things happening. And I live next to an apple orchard. And growing up, there was something that would come and steal apples. And I found out later that that is exactly what they do. There were several other sightings after that I interviewed people. Again, they all said the same thing. The grassmen, the Bigfoot, hairy man, whatever. They aren't there to hurt anybody. We know this, no one's ever been harmed. They just want to live their lives.
Well, I can't imagine what they would do when it gets so doggone hot and humid in the summertime, wearing all that hair. I would think, if it were me, I'd want to be laying in water somewhere or underground or in a cave or something. But people have seen them. I took a sighting report a few years back where the witness thought he was watching a man wearing a long, full-length coat, a heavy coat, and the particular day was very hot and very humid. And, he's thinking, what's this guy wearing this heavy coat for when it's 89 degrees out? But what was Bigfoot doing out when it was 89 degrees, moving around in the daytime?
Certainly, I think weather and climate plays a huge role in sightings overall and also seasonally. One of the main things that I think is in play here is, as I mentioned, we have the sighting reports over time really strongly suggest that temperate rainforest is the species' natural preference for reasons having to do with climate. I mean, for one thing, in a temperate rainforest or just in a temperate forest like Southeast Ohio has, the only problem in calling Southeast Ohio a temperate rainforest is it doesn't get enough rain to qualify. I mean, typically 55 inches to 60 inches a year gets you into the rainforest category, and if not, then you're just a temperate forest, which Ohio probably is where that falls. But the effect of a temperate rainforest is to regulate temperature so that winters are not as harsh. That would seem to be an ideal situation for a creature if it's living year-round in that area, to not have an extremely harsh winter. And on the other end of the spectrum, that would sort of moderate the upper temperatures as well. Even though it's a humid climate, it's not unbearably hot. There's a lot of cloud cover in temperate rainforest areas that also would mitigate hot sun and extremely hot temperature. And so that put together with what a temperate rainforest creates, which is a robust flora and fauna, lots of water sources, the things that you would need to support life. I think weather and climate go hand in hand in the case of something like this, so that it would gravitate towards the coastal Alaska, northwest Washington, even western North Carolina. Plenty of places in West Virginia and southeast Ohio, I think, does have some microclimate areas where if it's a especially rainy spring, it would mimic a rainforest situation. You just look around and see all the moss in a shady area. You probably have the recipe for that.
I don't know. I don't know if we really have a preference. Like I said, I think this, it mainly has to do with food source. The stories alone, I mean, I've got stories, accounts, reports from all through the year, but I don't know if I'd say it's just based on the seasons, really, the stories in general. I think, like I said again, it's based on probably when people start to move and these things are moving and they kind of come in together, meet up with each other, I guess, in certain areas.
Sure. I mean, the fall kind of makes sense, the harvest. You have all the crops that have come in, and a lot of the times, especially in Ohio, where you have all the farmland and everything, you see these creatures, people say they see these creatures along the woodland, or on the wood line, outside of the fields, and sometimes even in their fields. I've taken a lot of reports from farmers and even from Amish that have said that they've seen them in their fields. So I think it's following the food, like any creature, like we would do. I don't know, are they more ape-like, are they more human-like? But it just makes sense to me. In the spring, I often wonder just if they're coming back into the area. People will often ask if I think that if they migrate or not. First of all, I don't know. I'm not sure. But secondly, I think when you're looking at gorillas or chimpanzees or humans that are nomadic, they follow food, they follow the seasons, they follow, if they're a predator, because in Ohio I would think they have to be to survive our winters and everything, then they would follow other animals coming into the area. So that would be my guess.
It depends. It's like the old, does the tree fall and does it make a noise? I mean, people have to be there to witness a Bigfoot or Sasquatch sighting, so it depends on where they're at and that.
Well, here's something that I'll tell you guys that a lot of people probably won't agree with me on, but I don't think they breed every year. I actually think that they breed when they is most optimal. Like I know there was reports done on, with bonobos that during times of like stressful situations like drought, water, that sort of thing, not enough, that they actually can produce an enzyme that won't allow them to actually become impregnated. And I have a feeling that's probably what these things do too, because it only makes sense. If you had like, you know, bred every single year, I think we'd have more of them. But I think we're kind of approaching the endangered species list, honestly. And I don't think they do every year. And I think it has to be if the environment's right. And I think they're adapted for that. Everything I've seen from them seems to show that they're actually adapted for the environment that they're in. So to me, it makes sense that they probably do that.
For the seasonal, I think it's they're out looking for food, maybe raiding the campgrounds or sneaking around. In the winter, they're looking for people with chicken farms or sheep or something so they can grab a quick meal.
From Ashtabula County in the far northeast to the Sasquatch Triangle encompassing Coshocton, Muskingum, and Guernsey counties, down to remote Vinton County and the territories of the Wayne National Forest, prime time for a Bigfoot sighting in Ohio is the fall of the year. During this season, eyewitnesses have reported close-range road crossings in which Bigfoot comes perilously close to being hit by a vehicle. There are also terrifying tales told of isolated cabins receiving nighttime visits from curious hair-covered creatures, and intense encounters relayed by outdoorsmen from the vulnerable position of their tree blinds. What makes the autumn the optimal time of year for a brush with Sasquatch is, of course, a matter of speculation. Logically speaking, when you combine the loss of leaf cover with more humans in the woods hunting, camping, and fishing before the snow flies, the number of potential observers multiplies. Whatever is out there has a greater chance of being seen. And if whatever is out there is big, hair-covered, and hungry, motivated by the urgent need to prepare for winter's extremities, it may be a little less concerned with detection than it normally would be. All of which is to say that when Ohio's temperatures begin to drop, the farmers start their harvests, and the trees' first fiery colors appear. Keep a closer watch on the roadsides and dark tree lines and the unlit corners of the old homestead. You might be closer than you've ever been to Buckeye Bigfoot.
So when it comes to tracking our sighting reports, we collect data year-round. We've not seen a major increase between summer, fall, winter, and spring. The only real definitive movement that we see in the sighting activity is when the berries are on. Aside from that, it just kind of trickles in. But when the berries are out, when you got your blackberries, raspberries, wineberries popping out, then you're going to have more activity from all wildlife in general. So it does influence the Bigfoot sighting reports in that respect, but it's really only during that time.
Well, if they can find an area, like there's a pine thicket at Salt Fork State Park, and you can walk in there when it's 90 degrees outside and humid, and as soon as you walk in there, it's at least 10 degrees cooler. It's very comfortable. So, and I think they're aware of places like that where they can go to cool off, or as I said earlier, maybe get down in the creek and lay in a, even a shallow body of water to get cooled off. Or maybe it doesn't bother them like it does some humans, to be hot and sweaty. And
I think they may. I think they may move towards the places that they prefer and follow that sort of temperate zone, wherever that happens to be. That may not necessarily be north, south, east, and west. chances are that has more to do with elevation, because you can get a more comfortable elevation by climbing. And that's something that the work of Russ Jones really brought out in his Stone Man book, is the idea that in West Virginia there's potential just in elevation change throughout the year to approximate the type of climate that a Sasquatch would prefer.
Well, I think that the interesting thing would be that, you know, Bigfoot would have to be an omnivore to be able to survive winter largely in North America. So does that mean that they're less active, so they're burning less calories? Do they somehow store food up? Are they more active in the winter because they're having, to find food more? So I'm really not sure that we're going to see an increase in activity based on sightings. I think that Bigfoot are largely in the same area, and that they're moving across, the different areas that they're in based on a cycle. Like, they know and have been raised by their family to know, where people are at certain times of the year. They know where food can be found, whether it's January or March or July, and I think that they migrate, and I'm saying migrate loosely, meaning they're moving through their area in order to find the food.
In my opinion, I believe it's more that than, like I said, the food sources, the spring food sources, when things are starting to come alive, then nature comes alive. So I guess these things start to, again, hunt and search and go out for food. In the fall, I mean, like I said, I don't know if there's really a hibernation period with them, but in the fall, maybe they're stocking up for something like that, or or getting prepared for the colder months. But I don't know if there's an exact preference for them.
I think it's just when the people are out. Now, they may be searching for, farther in the wintertime for food than they normally do. So, for example, if the berries are out, the fruit's out, they don't have to go as far. So in the wintertime, when they have less of that, then I think that they go farther for deer and, the other critters.
One of the cool things that we're doing in Project Zoobook is 2 of our taxonomists. They work with different universities. They are working on a mapping project. I know there's other mapping projects that are out there where they have overlaid the sightings of Bigfoot across North America with the sightings of black bear across North America. And they've taken a lot of different data points, whether it is weather, whether the crops that are in, whether it could be what other animals are around, that kind of thing. And what they found is that a lot of that aligns. And the first time I heard that, I thought, okay, well, are you saying that everybody's seeing black bear? And they're like, no, what we're saying is this seems to be a viable species. Like, it fits the points of a real living, breathing species. So they've done a lot of collecting of that. I'm not privy to everything that they are using. I know in the Bigfoot Mapping Project app, Scott, he has done a lot of that too, putting time of day, whether they're close to water, all kinds of things in there. So all that, I think, feeds into it.
I seem to start getting reports around, like I said, this time of year in May, sort of a lot of stuff. But I also think that probably is based on, like, you also get a lot of foliage and things. So maybe if they do have young, that they come, when the food is right, kind of thing. And the one area that we researched for a long time, I actually kind of wondered if it's like where maybe they do come through every 3 years, something like that, and maybe with young, because there's just so much food and it's everywhere, like everything from ramps and wild garlic and skunk cabbage and all that. That's all there for them. But otherwise, I can't really give you a reason, specific.
To spot the thing, if you're a fair weather person and you want to go out to the woods when it's a nice day and you sight it, then it's going to be documented as a sighting during a partly cloudy day. If you're a person that's mushroom hunting and it happens to be raining and you see the creature, then it'll be documented as that. It's just all, I think it's just all by chance. As far as wild animal, we're all animals, and the human animal is a much more spoiled, daily routine type of animal than what animals are that live in the woods. They don't care if it rains, snows, or whatever. If I want to go to Salt Fork and I find out that it's going to be storming like crazy, I'm staying home, but they wouldn't. So I think the possibilities of seeing something on a sunny day as compared to a stormy day is, the possibilities are a lot better on that sunny day because people just have a habit of going out and enjoying the weather.
Okay, so if you could state your name and explain where we are.
Randy Grimes, and we're at my house in Petersburg, Ohio.
Petersburg, Ohio. Okay, cool. All right, can you go into the experience that you had? Explain like when it was, time of year, as many details as you can remember.
Well, I'm not sure how many years ago it was. It was probably in the summertime, maybe early fall. But I mean, leaves and everything were still all on the trees and things. But I was letting the dog out and I could hear coyotes yipping. And first I thought maybe they were just like beagles running a rabbit, because I used to have beagles and I'd go to dog trials. So that's sort of what it sounded like. And the dog was out for a while and I come back out and let her in, and I was standing outside the back door just listening to them. And they just kept carrying on, going across the hillside like. And then all of a sudden there was just a great big, like a grunt, just whoo, and everything went silent. Coyotes quit yipping, there was no sound anywhere. And I mean, it just sent chills up my back, because it was something that could make things that quiet that fast. And then I went back in the house. So.
Are we near a body of water right now?
Are we near a body of water?
Yeah.
Leesville Lake's just right down the road, about half a mile. The Petersburg Marina. So, and there's a creek runs through the bottom.
Have you ever heard a noise like that before?
No, not like that. I mean, I've heard other noises, but I don't know what they were or anything, but like that, just to hear something that made things just go completely silent. I suppose it could happen other places, but I've never had it here.
So there's been a lot of clear cutting. There was gas and pipeline that came in, and so even up behind the cabin where we were having all of our activity, it's clear cut now. The place where you had your sighting is twice as large as it was, just completely clear cut. So it's changed a good bit. And activity is ramped down. I mean, we haven't been having anything going on.
Yeah, they changed the cabin some too, right? The cabin looks different.
Yeah, there's an extra hunting blind up there. They've changed some stuff inside the cabin to accommodate more people.
It's like we said, the problem with the weather changing being the issue is that we were here at the change from summer into fall, and that seemed to be the height of the activity. Mm-hmm. and then it was crazy through all of September, even into October, when the weather had already changed pretty dramatically. Mm-hmm. So I don't really know that that's the case. I do think these things are smart enough to know to stay further back when there's less leaf cover.
Right.
And that seemed to hold up, like, as we were out here, for sure. I think they were moved off the other property from the clear cutting that went on over there.
Yeah.
They came over here, and then they were already I think they were already starting to move out of the area when the cutting really started here, when they started redigging the pipeline.
Right.
And so they were, I don't think this property meets their needs.
Right.
Because there's the spring here, but the thing you hear about Bigfoot is they always follow the creek, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no creek here.
Right.
There's no running water here.
Yeah.
And then you factor in that so much of the property is field.
Yeah.
And isn't sort of the typical Bigfoot habitat. Wait, it's up here, right? So I think they were headed out of here before the clear cutting came along, but I think the clear cutting probably helped move them out. Oh, that tree came down, huh?
Yeah.
Was that like that last time I came down?
It's been down for a little while, but
It was like that when Tyler and I were here.
Okay.
So we lucked out, essentially, is what happened.
Yeah.
With the timing and...
I think everybody lucks out. You think about, like, the Minerva monster case, and those people lucked out because their house just sits in this perfect spot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you go to the Caton house where they live, it's sort of the perfect spot. Right. Just enough to entice something out of the woods, and they were throwing scraps in a pit behind the house when it started coming around. The biggest knock against the existence of Sasquatch in the state of Ohio is the weather, I think. Because it makes no sense that these things survive here year-round in a state where we get horrifically cold winters. Like there's usually days out of our winter that are like below zero.
Right.
With a wind chill of like -20.
Mm-hmm.
And so you look at this property especially, and I'm like, if they're living here, they need during the winter, they need a pine forest. They need something, an area that's going to cut the wind. The two most obvious options would be that area over there, and then there's one up on the hill behind the cabin, but the one up on the hill sits on top of a hill. Right. And I've been inside it. It does a lot to cut the wind, but not as much as that area over there.
Mm-hmm.
But your problem really becomes, if they're here during the winter, they're here in a very condensed area. Yeah. Like the forest here is not thick.
Right.
And I think there's better options for them just a mile down the road, like even headed back toward Corey's mom's house. And that makes sense since that's where her sighting happened.
Yeah, that's one thing about this. Like you said, the pine area is extremely small here. So there wouldn't not only not be shelter, but there wouldn't be a place to hide.
Yeah.
If they were wanting to remain unseen, especially knowing that we were up here. I mean, it was not a secret that we were here nearly every weekend for quite some time.
Yeah. Well, I think all of that makes perfect sense. I think the fact that when we had the most activity was when it was makes sense, because we're coming into the area. There's still all the heavy leaf canopy up. Mm-hmm. The weather's cooling down. We were out here a lot during that month, especially. I mean, probably 2 weeks out of the month were spent here. Mm-hmm. And we were loud. So, and then as time goes on and we get into October and November, the activity dwindles. We stop coming out as much, and then it just dries up and there's nothing left. It's not to say Yeah, I think the key is like always going back to what Cliff Barrickman talked about, which is like that he believes they have a home range.
Mhm.
So this is probably within that home range.
Right.
But I think we were happened to be here when they had kind of made this their base of operations while they were figuring out where they were going.
Right.
And they've probably by now found a much better place to sleep at night than this property.
Yeah, that makes sense, because the property next to us, there was the clear cutting, but a clear cutting for like a dirt bike track.
Mhm.
So there's constant commotion, and then things were quieter over here, and then whenever clear cutting came here, then there's nothing left.
Yeah.
For them.
There's also the fact that like there's a nearby cave that they can bed down, that they could have bed down in. I don't think they're over there anymore, but there's that cave that we explored over on the other property.
Mm-hmm.
And here you don't have any caves that I'm aware of.
No.
You do have the abandoned building up there. That would be a decent place to get in out of the weather.
Yeah, we know coyotes use that.
But they're fighting with coyote for that.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
that area. I think they're here year round, but I don't think they're here
Right.
year round.
There isn't much about Ohio's climate that would be classified as extreme, at least not yet. Since the beginning of the 20th century, Ohio's average temperature has risen by 1 degree. That doesn't sound like much, but between December 2018 and February 2019, Ohioans experienced a winter 6 degrees warmer than the average. A warmer Ohio means more intense droughts, like the one being experienced in all but 4 counties as this episode is in production in 2024, including 12 counties that fall into the category of exceptional drought. There's nothing on the scale more severe. Guernsey and Muskingum counties, both points on the Sasquatch Triangle, are part of this unfortunate list. Perhaps counterintuitively, a warming climate also means heavier rain when it does arrive, and more frequent flooding, along with an uptick in severe weather. Where does this leave a creature the likes of Bigfoot? All things considered, it may create a more hospitable environment in the short term. Researchers often point to high rainfall totals as a defining characteristic of Sasquatch habitat, and the benefits of a warmer winter seem self-evident for something that presumably spends significant time outside. However, droughts, flooding, and other disasters could alter the landscape to the degree that Sasquatch are forced to move about in search of a new place to shelter. In that case, let's hope that such changes would not mean the eventual loss of the species to another region. Strange as it may sound, it just seems that Bigfoot belongs here, in Ohio.